Okay, so this dilemma game helps to illustrate the instinct to compete even when cooperation is the better strategy. So the way that the game is played is you have little tokens that you hold in your hand, and one token is red and one token is blue, and your partner has a red token and your blue token. And so if you both play blue, you get 3 points. If you both play red, you each get 1 point. If you play red and your partner plays blue, you get 5 points. And if your partner plays red and you play blue, you get nothing. So you could see where there might be a really strong instinct to try and play red, hoping that your partner will play blue. But of course, if you're both being self-interested, you're both going to be playing red, right? So you're going to keep getting 1 point. And if you keep both playing red, you get 1 point per turn, and you feel like, well, that's not too bad. I'm getting a point every time. But if you both played blue every time, you would get 3 times as many points. And by playing blue, you're running the risk of being the person who gets 0 if your partner plays red. But if you both play blue, then you both are getting 3 points. And so you could both be doing 3 times as well as if you play red in a sort of this competition mindset, right? But what I told you at the end of the last video, I wasn't going to tell you what the premise of the game was. I wanted you to try and play a version of it by yourselves, and then I would explain it to you. I actually explained the game to my husband before we played it. I told him it was this demonstration of, our tendency to want to compete even when cooperation is a better strategy. So I kept playing blue over and over and over again, trying to show him that I'm here to cooperate. And he kept playing red and getting 5 points every time and wondering why I was being so stupid. Like, why do I keep playing blue when clearly he's throwing red and he keeps getting 5 points? And I kept playing blue. I told myself, no matter what else happens, I'm only going to play blue because I'm going to show him I'm here to cooperate, right? And hope that at some point he's going to realize, okay, you've already got 100 points at this point. Why don't you go ahead and throw me a bone and throw out a blue one? He just would, and he kept going, why do you keep playing blue? And I said to him, because I'm cooperating and I'm trying to get you to cooperate. He goes, why would I cooperate? We're playing a game. So one of the problems with this setup is that it does look very much like a game. And we all know that when you play a game, the goal is to win. But it also illustrates this larger point that, you have this dilemma. Should I work in my own self-interest and put red, hoping that my partner will put blue? Or should I work in the pair's best interest and make sure that we're both getting 3 points by throwing out blue? Of course, you run the risk too, if you play blue, that your partner decides, well, I'm going to throw out a red since you keep doing blue and I'll get extra points. And so your partner may not have a pure, non-competitive, cooperative kind of heart. So it's a game that kind of illustrates our tendency to want to compete rather than cooperate. So let's talk a little bit more about how researchers have examined the issue of the tendency to compete when cooperation might be to our better advantage. So the idea in this little map is that we've got 2 companies, Acme and Bolt. And Acme, you can see its starting point is the upper left circle. Bolt's starting point is the lower right circle. Acme is trying to get straight across the board to the rectangle that says Acme destination, and Bolt is trying to get straight across the board from themselves, which is the Bolt destination in that rectangle. Okay, so you see the map, right? So you have these alternate routes that are very twisty and turny and probably mountainous to make them so twisty and turny. So they're a longer route. They each have this longer route that they could use that only they would be on, right? So Acme could have its own dedicated route and just go that way every time. Bolt could have its own dedicated route and go that way every time, or they could take the much quicker route, which is the 1-lane road. So if you're going to take the 1-lane road, that means that if there's already a truck on it, then your truck has to wait, right? So what they found when people are set up with this little problem is that people don't tend to say, let's work out a deal, or let's figure out a way to, make sure that each of us is taking a turn on it, or let's plan our schedule or something like that. Instead, they tend to compete, where they say, well, I'll just get there first, and that way I'll already be on the road and the other person will have to wait. Definitely people would avoid the alternate route because it's so time consuming, and they try and figure out a way to maximize their use of the one lane road without a lot of consideration about cooperation. So even though both companies would benefit in the long run if they could figure out a way to cooperate, people, when playing this game, this mock-up of what it would be like, they tend to go with the competition strategy. Now, you might have heard of the prisoner's dilemma, maybe in a TV show or something like that. The premise in the prisoner's dilemma is that you've got two people who were arrested for a crime. They were, assumed to be like, in collusion or whatever. So they're arrested and they're placed into separate cells, so they can't talk to each other. And they're offered the opportunity to confess to the crime or not. Now, if prisoner A does not confess and prisoner B does, then prisoner A will get 15 years and prisoner B will get released because he confessed and made a deal and probably turned state's as evidence on prisoner A. So prisoner A gets all the punishment, B gets nothing if prisoner B confesses and prisoner A doesn't. If prisoner A confesses and prisoner B doesn't, same thing happens, but in reverse order, right? So whoever confesses gets released, and the one who doesn't confess gets 15 years. Okay. So what the authorities, of course, are trying to do is get one of them to make a deal and confess, so that the authorities will not have to, kind of work for figuring out who did what or whatever. If I can get one of you to confess, then we can close the case, right? So that's why they're offering this deal, right? So if both of them confess, they're both going to get 10 years because neither one of them really made a deal then, right? Like not one of them didn't turn state's evidence on the other. Instead, we both confessed, we both get the punishment. If neither of them confess, each of them will only get 1 year because that's all the actual evidence that we have is to charge you with a much lesser crime. So you'll both get just the 1 year. So if we can both manage to stay silent, we get a year. If one of us stays silent and the other one doesn't, the one who confesses gets the reward for it and is released, and the one who doesn't confess gets 15 years. If we both confess, we both get 10 years. So in the prisoner's dilemma, the prisoner has to decide, is it worth my while to confess, right? Because if I confess and my partner does, we're getting 10 years. But if I confess and my partner doesn't, I get released. So it's not like confess is the easy option, because if one of us confesses and the other one doesn't, the one who confesses gets nothing. But if we both confess, we both get 10. If we both can be silent, we both get a year. So you can see the motivation to not confess, right? Don't say anything and hope that your partner's not going to say anything either, because then we only get a year. But you never know if your partner's going to roll over, right? And that's the prisoner's dilemma. How can I trust my partner to stay silent so that we both only get a year? Or should I sing on my partner so that I get nothing and let my partner take everything? What if I do it too late and my partner has already confessed? And now here I come in, I confess, and we both get 10. What to do? There's a strong tendency to compete rather than cooperate in the prisoner's dilemma game. So in the game, of course, these are people who are just imagining they're in this situation and then they choose to confess or not. In real life, of course, this happens all the time, whether prisoners should confess or turn state's evidence on their partner in crime or whatever. And so you can imagine there's strong pressure on them to compete, that is, confess before their partner does. It turns out that in the game structure, across the different research studies, they've found that about only a third of the choices are cooperative. Most of the choices, 2/3 of the choices are going to be competitive. If one of the partners starts off cooperating, typically it starts to go down over time as they realize that their partner keeps selling them out, right? Because you give them several times through the game to see what their approach is. So it's like they're learning from the game that you can't really trust your partner. So what determines whether we're going to compete or we're going to cooperate? One is the reward structure. If we get a reward that is separate from the person who we might be thinking about cooperating with, it's going to make us more likely to compete, right? So if the reward structure is individualistic, that fosters competition. If the reward structure is cooperative, where both of you get the same outcome, then the behavior tends to be more cooperative. So the reward structure, like, am I going to get something for myself, or is it something we're going to share anyway, will help to determine competition versus cooperation. Competitive reward structure is where literally one of us gets and the other one does not, right? So in competitive, it's a zero-sum game. One of you gets the reward and one of you doesn't. And so that's obviously is going to contribute to greater competition, because if I'm getting nothing and you're getting something, of course, next time I want to get something and you get nothing. Another factor that contributes to whether a person in a situation competes or cooperates is personal values, right? Like, if I tend to be a more competitive person, even in the face of something where I would actually do better personally if I cooperated, I might still treat it like a competitive situation. Like my husband playing the dilemma game that I described. I mean, there was honestly nothing in it for him to be winning. We weren't keeping track of points. The whole goal was for him to figure it out and start cooperating. And nevertheless, his personal values said, this looks like a game. When I play games, I like to win them, and I'm going to win this game. When I told him at the end that he lost it by not being cooperative, he was pretty bent out of shape. And then I told him, well, I don't know if you lost or not, because I don't know if there's a right or wrong on this game. But communication patterns can also factor into whether a person's competing or cooperating with their partner, because like if we have to be silent and we don't get to share information, that's going to make it harder to cooperate, because we don't know what's in the mind of our partner, right? So if we have to just trust, even if you going into the game, you say, okay, I'm going to cooperate every time you can trust me. Or let's say that I say to my fellow criminal who, we got arrested, and I say, don't say anything. I'm not going to say anything. They got nothing on us. There's nothing they can pin on us as long as we stay silent. The fact that we're separated from each other makes it harder to maintain that cooperation, right? You start to think as an individual, and you start to think, can I trust my partner? After all, we are criminals. I don't know. And so then we may end up, rolling over on our partner. Reciprocity. This is why, I told you I kept cooperating time after time after time, hoping that my husband was going to ultimately be, reciprocating that cooperation, that ultimately he would figure out that we're playing this game cooperatively and he would reciprocate. Now, there are different ways that reciprocity reveals itself in these games, in the research studies on these games. Tit for tat is what they call it when the mindset is, I do whatever you did last time. So if my partner cooperated on the last round, it makes it more likely that I will cooperate on this round, because that I pick up that that's what my partner is doing. Okay, you're cooperating, I'll cooperate. If you're competing, I'll compete. So whatever you did last time, I'm more likely to do this time. So I cooperate, you compete. Well, on the next one, I compete. Generous tit for tat is when I overlook some competitiveness if now you've decided you're going to start cooperating. So maybe the game started off and you were doing a bunch of competition and I kept cooperating, and then ultimately you came around and started cooperating. I'm going to go ahead and overlook the fact that early on you were competitive, and I'm going to assume that now going forward we're cooperative. So I cooperate, you compete. I compete, you cooperate. On the next one I'm going to say, okay, it looks like you're cooperating now, so now I'm going to cooperate. All right, all of that is a very nice setup for this English game called Golden Balls, only in England. No, actually, I think it's called Split or Steal, and they use golden balls to do it. And I'm going to let you watch this, and it illustrates very much that dilemma game that I showed you at the beginning using blue and red. They're doing it with these balls. So I will see you on the other side of this video.